This is Stephen Kotler, and you're listening to Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Rock Goddess, and I am rolling with Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Dave Meltzer, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Moorjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
What is up, beautiful people? Welcome back. I'm Trey Downs, and this is Your Superior Self. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with me today. Thank you for downloading this episode. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave a rating and review. It helps me scale the show. And people need to hear this episode because I have the great and powerful Anita Marjani on the show. For those who do not know her, she is the author of the best-selling book, New York Times bestseller, Dying to Be Me, My Journey from Cancer to Near Death to True Healing. And this was a transformational book for myself, as for many. And for those who do not know Anita that well, she's an author, speaker, influencer. Make sure to pick up her brand new book that I think is released this month of March, titled Sensitive is the New Strong. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. But she's also a speaker who is often invited to come speak at conferences and events around the globe. For her to share her insights that she gained while she was on the other side, in the other realm. And she's also a frequent guest at the University of Hong Kong's Department of Behavioral Sciences, speaking on topics such as terminal illness, facing death, and the psychology of spiritual beliefs. All things that I'm very interested in. This is going to be a fantastic episode, fantastic conversation with Anita. And if you haven't already, go check out her website, anitamoorjani.com. There you can find out more information about her. You can follow her, and she actually has a sanctuary, which I am a member of, and I can highly suggest to you to join that sanctuary. I don't want to say club, but it is a place where if you need to get out of the negativity that you are surrounded in, if you need support systems, if you need a place to go where you can feel confident in finding spiritual solutions for yourself in your pursuit of either higher consciousness, love, self-love, support, this is that place for you. I can attest because I'm a member. I love everything that there is offered in this group. It goes from meditations, custom meditations by Anita, masterclasses, podcast episodes, support from sanctuary members. There's just so many things that I think that everyone could benefit from, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge fan of Anita's, but I am a member of the sanctuary, and I always get on every week and kind of see what's going on. How can the meditations help me? Because they're very impactful, very powerful. They help me get into a nice alpha state, and I'm able to lift the veil and experience my higher being for sure. And I highly suggest that you guys do that. And to give you a little bit of a context of what we talk about in this episode, here is a preview of what's to come.
I was really in a bad state. I had lymphoma for 4 years, and by that point, I had tumors throughout my lymphatic system. And the doctors basically, it started out with, in December of 2005, they said I had 3 months to live. And then on February 1st, on February 2nd of 2006, they said I had a few hours to live, that these are my final hours, because by this point, my organs had shut down. I weighed about 85 pounds. My muscles had completely atrophied. I couldn't walk. My lungs were filled with fluid. When I would lie down, I would choke on my own fluid. I couldn't sleep. Because I couldn't lie down without choking. So I had to be propped up, but I was so uncomfortable. My body had stopped absorbing nutrition. So I was I was wasting away. I was dying. And when your body stops absorbing nutrition, it starts to, there's a medical term for it. I don't remember what it was, but it starts to actually eat away at your own body to survive. So my body was like completely wasted away. I was emaciated. And
Yeah, that is some powerful stuff. That is so powerful. I cannot wait to get into this with Anita. I can't wait to share this episode with you. I can't wait for you to hear it. I really want to hear your thoughts on it. I want to hear how this story affects you and your spiritual journey, how it's going to help you develop more self-love for yourself and trust yourself and what you're experiencing, and how you can flourish as yourself, as who you are, accepting that, loving yourself, and allowing yourself to be the person that you are meant to be. It doesn't necessarily need to mean that you have to be this New York Times bestselling author. It doesn't mean you have to go out there and be the next NBA star. It doesn't mean that you have to be the next podcast star. It doesn't mean that you have to be the MVP of life. You just got to be who you are and love yourself for it, and experience life and experience the things that come to you that make you you. That is all you got to do. And I know it's hard because I struggle with it all the time, but it is surrounding yourself with a community, and surrounding yourself with people, and listening to the right content that gives you that positive vibe that allows you to continue and allows you to realize the things that you're interested in and the things that make you yourself, and that it is okay. It is okay to be who you are, and that there is no judgment in that, and you shouldn't judge yourself. Do not deny yourself the love of the universe. Embrace it and bring your energy to it, to advance it, to make it stronger for others. Yep. So with that said, please go to traydowns.com. Leave me a message. Let me know what you guys are up to. Follow me on Instagram at tdowns80. Give me a follow and let me know how you guys are doing. And without wasting too much more of your time, let's get back into this. I'm excited to present to you the powerful and the great Anita Moorjani.
hi, I'm Anita Marjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Anita, I cannot thank you enough for coming on this show. I was just pre-air. I was telling you that, it's crazy how the universe works. Your book, Dying to Be Me, as soon as I read it, I was like, I have to have her on the show. Her story is phenomenal. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so touched to hear how my story moved you.
I feel like you get that a lot though, right? I mean, your story is amazing.
I do get it a lot, and it pleases me. I mean, and that's why I keep sharing it, and and I make sure I'm out there talking to people and answering questions, because I really want people to get it. I guess I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about people understanding what it is that I experienced and what it is I'm talking about and where I'm coming from when I say what I say.
Sure. No, you started out in the book that really, really got my attention was a date that stood out. It was February 2nd, 2006. And that's the day that you considered the day of your death. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And that's crazy how to start a book. Most books start, they go into the story and how everything started. Yours starts with the day of your death. That was pretty impressive. Can you talk about that? Can you, I guess, talk about the book? We can talk about the book. I'm just trying, your story's just, I'm very excited to talk about it. I'm just trying to figure out the best way. I think talking about your, what happened to you, right? You had diagnosed with lymphoma. You had a long bout with cancer, tumors. I mean, you were pretty bad off, right?
I was really in a bad state. I had lymphoma for 4 years. And by that point, I had tumors throughout my lymphatic system. And the doctors basically, it started out with, in December of 2005, they said I had 3 months to live. And then on February 1st, on February 2nd of 2006, they said I had a few hours to live, that these are my final hours, because by this point, my organs had shut down. I weighed about 85 pounds. My muscles had completely atrophied. I couldn't walk. My lungs were filled with fluid. When I would lie down, I would choke on my own fluid. I couldn't sleep. Because I couldn't lie down without choking, so I had to be propped up. But I was so uncomfortable. My body had stopped absorbing nutrition. So I was wasting away. I was dying. And when your body stops absorbing nutrition, it starts to, there's a medical term for it. I don't remember what it was, but it starts to actually eat away at your own body to survive. So my body was like completely wasted away. I was emaciated, and I couldn't walk. And then I went into a coma. And so that was the point that the doctors told my family that I only had a few hours to live. But while I was in the coma, I was aware of something much, much greater than this physical world that we live in. And that's when I started to really start to understand who I was, why I was here, what the purpose of my life was. And I started to understand why I was dying and why I had got sick. And it was just the most incredible experience. And I reached a point where I felt I had the choice as to whether to come back or not. Now, I want to say here that I was also aware that I was surrounded by other beings, other spiritual beings, and I recognized some of them, one of them being my dad, who had passed away 10 years prior. And they were there to help me and guide me and to actually talk me into coming back into my physical body. And I didn't want to come back because it was so beautiful being in that state. I felt surrounded by just a feeling of unconditional love. And I was just enveloped in this feeling of just love, nothing like I had ever felt in this physical life before. And all the pain was gone and the fear was gone. It was just incredible. But I felt that the other beings or spirits around me were encouraging me to go back to my body. And no part of me wanted to go back. But then I felt my dad wanted me to know that now that I knew the truth of who I really am, and now that I understood why my body was sick, that if I chose to go back, my body would heal very, very quickly. And so I was in the coma for about 36 hours. And so I finally made the choice to come back. And when I made that choice, as soon as I made that choice, my dad, his last words to me on the other side was, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. And it was, as soon as he said that to me, my eyes started to open over here in this physical side. And I came out of the coma and everybody was stunned. And within 4 days, the tumors, which had been the size of golf balls all over my body, they started to shrink. And within 4 or 5 days, they had shrunk by 60 or 70%. And within 3 weeks, the doctors were having trouble even finding cancer in my body and cancerous tumors. After 5 weeks, they let me go home to live my life cancer-free. And in fact, I spent much of that time just regaining my strength and eating properly and having physiotherapy to regain the strength in my legs and all. But the cancer was gone. All the tumors just kind of melted away, and the fluid from my lungs just went. It never came back, because over the period of 1.5 years prior to this near-death experience, prior to going into the coma, every time I'd have the fluid in my lungs drained, after a few weeks, it was back, and then I'd have it drained, and it was back. It would slowly accumulate back. But after the coming out of the coma, the fluid started to drain, and it never came back, and tumors just melted away. And so I was left to go and live my life fearlessly, as I was told by my dad. And that was in 2006. And here we are today, after the doctors told me I only had a few hours to live.
Oh, we just went from 0 to 100 miles an hour like in 2 seconds. And I'm like so fired up about your story. You talked about you knowing why you have cancer. And I have that underlined in this book. Like, why did you finally understand why you have cancer? Like, can you explain that? Like, why did you have cancer?
Okay, so now here's where it gets intricate. There are a lot of reasons, but if I had to put it down to, like, boil it down to just a couple of things, it would be a lack of self-love, self-esteem, belief in self, a faith in my own ability to heal, or a lack of faith in my ability, or a lack of faith in my connection to the universe. That's a big part of it. And when we don't love ourselves, excuse me, and when we don't feel we're here for a bigger purpose, so that our life has meaning or purpose, or when we don't feel that we matter and that we're connected to the universe, what happens is that our life becomes consumed with fear. So that, in two words, it was because I did not love myself, and actually in one sentence, it was because I did not love myself and my life was filled with fear. The two words are the love and fear. So my life was void of self-love and filled with fear. And I find that the two go hand in hand. When you do not love yourself, what replaces that love is fear. And when your life is filled with fear and void of love, it leads to basically a lack of meaning and purpose in your life. You lose your will to live. But it also, on a physical level, it depletes your immune system. It puts you in fight or flight all the time, which means you're always living from your baser survival instincts. When you're living from that fight or flight, fear-based place and your survival instincts, what happens is that you lose your connection to the higher parts of yourself, the part of you that's connected to the all that is, the part of you that gets that expansive feeling, like when you meditate, the part of you that's creative, that channels source, that creates art or music or passion. So all those get shut off when you're in survival mode. When you're living in fear, you're in survival mode. And that really makes you feel that your life has no purpose, and it also depletes your immune system.
Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about that in his research, living in that constant fight or flight, the chemicals that release into your body cannot withstand those chemicals for long periods of time. And thus the theory that the disease is created in your being, in your body. So that is your understanding of what happened to you, is like you were living in fear, but your background is so diverse. Like you grew up not in a traditional, I guess, in a Western traditional home where you had many cultures around you. Your parents were Hindus. You grew up, I think, in Hong Kong.
Yep.
So like there, and you went to different schools too. So you went to a Catholic school at once. So you have all these different philosophies and belief systems surrounding you. I mean, and plus you had the pressure of possibly being, your parents playing matchmaker with your husband. So it's like you had that going on. I mean, there's a lot of fear-based concepts and theories out there that you're trying to defend, and all you want to do is travel and live your life and be the person that you think Anita should be, or who you want to be. That has to create a lot of stress.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere because as you said, I grew up in Hong Kong, where the predominant culture is Chinese culture. And I went first to a Catholic school, and then later on to a school that was more not religious, but still it was a school, a British school. It was like a British military school. And so I was one of very, very few non-white kids in the school. My parents are Hindu. They wanted me to hold on to our Hindu culture. And so I struggled with that because I went to a school with kids from England. It was a British school. So my culture clashed with theirs. And one of the things that I often speak about is that, and if there's any listeners out there who grew up in a multicultural environment, if you grew up in a culture that's not yours, you will relate to this. But I grew up speaking 3 languages simultaneously, one of them being my parents' native language, an Indian dialect. The other one was Cantonese, which was the local language of the city I lived in. And the third one was English because of the school I went to. And I spoke all 3 fluently. And because I spoke all 3 fluently, I was aware of cultural things and pop culture of each particular culture. So in other words, you know what's trending in within each culture, and you know what movies they're watching. But what I noticed was that each of these 3 cultures, in a sense, they existed simultaneously, but they didn't blend with each other. There was like almost like no overlap. And I think the only way I can explain this is to kind of, if you imagine this, imagine that there's this huge poster, or you're living in a city where there are all these posters all over the city, but these posters are in a foreign language. Let's say they're in Chinese and you can't read Chinese. And they're huge posters and they're blasting out this information. And so everybody in the city who is Chinese is reading it, and they are aware of what these posters are saying, and it becomes common, dominant information within that culture. But the people who can't read Chinese, let's say the British people, are completely unaware of what that poster says. So what's happening is that each culture has information that the other culture doesn't have access to. And in many ways, there's no overlap. And I would kind of, I would move between these 3 cultures. And somehow, I don't know how, it's like it almost felt normal for the 3, to me, because I grew up in it, that each culture didn't know much about the other culture. Like another example is, like when I was with my Chinese friends, they would listen to their Chinese pop music, canto pop, we used to call it. And I was aware of the canto pop stars of that time, Kenny B, Anita Moorjani, and my Chinese friends would have posters of them, and they would go to their concerts with thousands of people would be there, and they would freak out if they met one of the pop stars in person. Now, one of those pop stars could walk through my school playground if they did, and nobody in the school would recognize them because my school was filled with British kids who had no idea what was happening in the canto pop culture. But if one of their British pop stars, like at that time it was Bay City Rollers or David Essex, if that person walked through the playground, the kids would freak out. So in other words, you have these kind of what I call parallel realities. And because I was aware of all the realities, I felt I fit into none of them. Sorry, that's a long way of explaining it, but I fit into none of them because each reality thought, the people within each reality thought that theirs was the only reality, and that theirs was the dominant one. And I knew it wasn't. Yeah. And
it's just it's powerful because like we experience that now, and like you took a road less traveled in your treatment for it. You at first you didn't do the chemo treatment. You actually left and I think went to India and studied yoga and meditation and more of a a different approach to therapy, right?
Yes, I did, and it actually worked. And so again, because what happened is that I started to realize that in this case, when I was diagnosed with the cancer, with the lymphoma, I knew two people who were going through the same, who were also diagnosed. One of them was my best friend, and I had been immersed in that world of being in the hospital with her, and I was immersed in the world of cancer, and I started to fear it a lot, because it was a shock to me that my best friend was diagnosed, and she was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer. And that started me on a journey to figure out what is the point of life? And that's when I really started to notice a huge difference between, for example, the Western way of healing an illness and the Eastern way of healing an illness, and they didn't overlap. And so as I watched what was happening to my friends, I saw that her health was actually deteriorating. And also my husband's brother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer, and he was deteriorating. And both of these people were getting the most expensive treatment, medical treatment that money can buy. They had good insurance, and they were going to the best hospitals, one in Hong Kong, one in New York. And yet they were both deteriorating. So interestingly, I was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was diagnosed, my first thought was, there's so many different options out there, whereas other people defaulted to the Western way of treating it, the conventional medical way, because they didn't know of other ways. Again, as like I explained, their realities didn't overlap with other realities. And I knew that Indian Ayurvedic ways were very powerful, just like traditional Chinese medicine is very powerful. So I decided to try the Ayurvedic way of doing it. Now, when I was immersed in the Ayurvedic world of healing, they didn't even use the word cancer. They said it's just an imbalance in your body, and we're going to work on balancing it. And they didn't believe in treating it with fear. So I was immersed in a whole different world, which was very different from the world that my friend was in. While my friend was going through chemotherapy and radiation, and her body was actually deteriorating from it, I was actually doing yoga and eating healthy and finding my purpose in life and my passion, and realizing the importance of taking care of myself. And my health started to get better. I noticed that the lumps I had in my lymphatic system were starting to soften and dissolve. And so it was working. But what happened is that, so I was there for 6 months in India, and then I came back to Hong Kong before I was 100% healed. And I felt I could handle the rest from Hong Kong, because I was I was missing home, I was missing my husband, I was missing my dog. So I came back to Hong Kong. But as soon as I came back to Hong Kong, I realized that my best friend, her situation had deteriorated dramatically. And when I went to see her, I was really shocked. And then I was immersed in a world, in a reality where, for me, that fear of cancer came flooding back. It just came flooding back, where everybody was talking about was that, oh, so how are you? You need to get scans. It was very irresponsible of you to just fly off to India when you should have just gone straight for treatment. And, you can die if you don't treatment. And there I am watching my friend, and then my friend dies. And so all that fear came flooding back, and I noticed that the lumps in my lymphatic system started to grow again. And I can like looking back, hindsight is 2020. I could tell you exactly when everything happened, and yet, uh, yeah. So I know what it was at what point that it really started to come back with a vengeance. It's when I was like completely immersed in that fear again.
Do you think it would have stayed, like it would have gone away if you stayed in India?
Yes, it would have. And and the thing is that, but it would have definitely, if I stayed, and if I stayed in that state that I was in while I was in India, coming back to Hong Kong and going and getting sucked into the whole dominant belief system there, which was the fear-based medical system, particularly in the community that I was in, and particularly because I knew two people who were dying from cancer. I feel that it's in a sense, it's what I call it your marinade when I speak, when I do workshops and when I speak to people. Your marinade has a lot to do with it. I was in that fear-based marinade. And when I was in India, I was not in that marinade. The trouble is that when you're in that marinade, you can't see a way out. I could not go back to India because now the marinade, I was like, when you're marinated in it, you have this fear that oh, it's the wrong thing to do to go to India, because everybody is kind of telling you, no, that's a dumb thing to do. It's all woo-woo. It's all, and so now even going back there is something that the magic has been taken away from it. And even doing that is a fear-based thing to do. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, getting out of that noise, right?
Yeah.
Getting out of that environment that is so negative and fear-based. And I totally get it. I think, even now I take a step back and I look at where we were pre-COVID and where we are now. Like, you can kind of see how you get caught up in that. And then the people that you surround yourself with are, you get diagnosed with cancer, you have all these checklists that you have to follow, and people are, that love you, that are emotionally tied to you, that want to see you live, make sure you get these checklists,
yes,
on the list. Right. So, I mean, to go outside of that, you're fighting not only yourself and your beliefs and your fears, but you're fighting other people's fears as well.
Yes, exactly. And these people mean well and they love you, which is what makes it even harder. And especially if deep down, your body, your mind knows something different, but it's really hard because that's you're in that marinade of people who think very differently from you. I mean, actually, they all think the same as each other, but my thinking was different. And I think my thinking was always different because I was brought up simultaneously in different cultures, and it created in me a way of thinking that is different from each culture on its own.
Sure. No, I mean, definitely your background is multicultural, and it's just, you definitely had a different mindset than most people your age back then, and people that you surrounded yourself with. What really fascinates me is just like the day that you were taken to the hospital when you were in the coma. You talked about this awareness of your being, or you felt like you knew. I don't know if it was like you knew, but like you were going to the hospital and you just felt good. You felt more alive than you had been in the last 6 months. You felt like you could, you were getting better. Can you explain that?
Yeah, when I was in the coma, it was like I couldn't feel my body anymore, and I felt expanded, like I was aware of everything that was happening around me and beyond, and like all the pain was gone, and I felt just incredible. But I was also aware of what everyone around me was feeling. It was like my consciousness and their consciousness overlapped. And like I could feel what my husband was feeling. I could feel he was distraught. I could feel what my mom was feeling. And I didn't want them to suffer. I didn't want them to feel sad for me because I was feeling the best I'd ever felt because I no longer felt my body or the pain in my body. It was like I felt like I was not even in my body anymore. I was expanded and big and outside of my body. And I felt free and light, just the most amazing feeling ever.
Mm. Have you felt that ever since, like through your exploration of consciousness or meditation? Have you ever gotten back to that?
I do get back to that, but probably not to that intensity.
Sure.
But I do go into, ever since that happened, I do actually go into states where I kind of touch on that, so that, and I do it consciously and deliberately so that I can get insights or get grounded, if you will, or because this world, this paradigm we live in, is one that seems intent to spread fear. That's something I noticed. Like when I got the message from my dad, go and live your life fearlessly, and really what he meant is just be yourself fearlessly and live fearlessly. And I thought, wow, that's easy. It's so easy. And why do we make it so hard? But as you live here, you understand why it's so hard, because again, it's the marinade. The marinade here is so fear-based. And so in order for me to not get sucked into this drama, this fear-based drama, like particularly now with the COVID and all our media is giving us fear-based messages, it's very easy to get sucked in and feel that fear. And again, live from your lower chakras or from your survival instincts. And when you live from there, as I said, you cut off your connection to your higher chakras and your connection to the all that is. So it's very easy to get sucked in and fall into that spiral. So I consciously do sit with myself and reach for those higher and higher states.
Yeah. The one thing that I love about your book is, in your story, is like you went from reading this book or reading a book that is similar to this, right? Like to understand the concept of a higher consciousness, to knowing that. And a lot of people can read your story, which is magnificent and it's very powerful, and be like, okay, what I've been practicing, to me, I've always wondered if it's true, if I'm feeling this. And then they look at your story and they're like, okay, I felt something similar to this. Maybe there's more to it. Like a lot of us want to know, what the other side under the veil looks like. And we don't know. We get to read people's stories like this, like your story, and kind of get that, I guess, I don't know, probably like that solidification of that is how it is on the other side, right? Like we all want to know, like, and getting to that higher consciousness can be frustrating because it's like, because you talked about the fear base and the I guess people try too hard and they want to reach a certain level of happiness or joy. They want to get rid of the fear. And it's like, we meditate, and we keep trying to raise our consciousness, and we feel something, or we judge what we're experiencing. And like listening to your story and reading it firsthand, and then the comments, I mean, everything that I've read religiously always points towards going within. And that is whether it's meditation or prayer or whatever, but finding that power from within and then loving that. And that's the common message, is to love. And what I love about your message is you got to love yourself. And that's what you say a lot in this book.
Yeah, you do have to, and I'll tell you why it's important to love yourself, because it doesn't matter to me whether we call it God or the universe or what we call it, but each and every one of us is part of that. We are a facet of God or the universe or the all that is. Each and every one of us is the universe or God expressing itself through our physical body. When you don't love yourself, you are denying God or the universe from expressing itself through you. And we don't have a right to do that.
That's so powerful. Is that when you really learned that concept, is when you had your near death experience? Is that when you
Yes.
understood everything? Like, you talk about us all being like a thread in a big quilt, right? Everyone
Yeah.
having a purpose. Like everyone says all the time, oh, I had to have a purpose. It might not necessarily you're going to the moon, like you're not, that might not be your purpose, but being the full version of yourself, that is your purpose, right? Like,
That is, yes, that is your purpose, because your spirit, your soul came here to express itself. And what we end up doing, though, is we end up thinking there's something wrong with me. I have to suppress myself. I have to be different. I have to impress people. I have to be something other than who I am. Well, what was the point of your soul coming as your soul if you have to keep changing and reinventing yourself? It's not about reinventing and changing. It's about being who you are. And so I sometimes use the example of Michelangelo. He used to carve these beautiful statues of angels out of marble and stone. And when people asked him, how do you carve such beautiful statues without any plans or anything? He had no drawings or plans, and he would just chip away and there would be a beautiful angel. And he said, the angel was always there. I just chip away and set the angel free. And so basically, unfortunately, the way that we're taught as though something is wrong with us, and we constantly have to improve ourselves, and we have to do this, and we have to add this. It's actually the other way around. What I tell people is you have to let go of what is not you and set yourself free, because who you are is a beautiful spirit. You are a beautiful vessel or channel of the universe or of God or whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
And so it's not about your purpose really is about being you. And once you set yourself free to be you, your purpose will unfold. You'll see it. You'll see it from being yourself. Right now, a lot of people's lives are messed up because they're being someone who they're not. And so the problems they attract are not their problems. They're the problems of the person who they're trying to be. And so then you get stressed out and you get burned out because you're solving problems that are attracted to or that are created by the person you're trying to be. Whereas when you are truly being yourself and you honor who you are, then the problems you attract, it doesn't mean you never attract problems, but you attract problems that help you to grow and to go and to become stronger and more, I guess, evolved or a better version of who you are. It's a different type of problem.
Yeah. I think it's expansion. I think that's what, my hypothesis is that we are, as a collective, to expand on consciousness, and the way that we do it individually is through educating ourselves and experiences and growth and learning. And that's what I'm finding for myself, is the more that and you never stop that. That never is never ending learning and growth. You talked about attraction. I actually was doing some research on you, and I came across, I think it was like one of your videos or Facebook or radio shows or something. And you actually have a pretty cool idea about the theory of I guess it's not a theory, law of attraction. Your thought on that? It's not necessarily about creating these thoughts in our minds. It's rather who you are, right? Like, can you explain that more?
Yes. So the traditional way that when people talk about law of attraction, we talk about how your thoughts create your reality. So if you want, certain things, you have to think about those more, and you have to think about them in a positive way. But my way is much easier, so much simpler. All you have to do is just love yourself, love your whole self, your spirit, your soul. And as long as you are being yourself and loving yourself, then what is truly yours comes to you. You don't have to worry about vision boards or watching your thoughts or anything. It really is about truly accepting all of you for who you are and loving all of you for who you are.
I love that. I love that idea better, because like you were talking in the video, the more that you try to like limit your thoughts and, oh my God, I just had a negative thought. Oh crap. Now you're judging everything that's
Yes.
going on in your mind. Now you're truly not being who you are. Like you're trying to like, all right, I have to have these thoughts. I have to, in order for me to get that job promotion or raise or find the person that I want to meet or build the house, like in order for that to happen, like, I mean, it might not be meant for you to happen. You might develop something a lot better, but it's like you can't do that unless you truly express who you are. And I love your take on it, because I can get with that. Like I can, the person that you're supposed to be will attract all of the great stuff that you're supposed to have.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so happy you watched my videos, and
I'm a big fan. Anita, like I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm a big fan of yours.
I didn't know. Thank you.
I just love everything that you're about. You just, like that universal love, that we're all a thread in this big quilt. I mean, just, it's tough to see that, because especially in the Western world, we've grown up in a society that doesn't allow you to look at yourself like that. That says you are not to view yourself as the universe or a part of that God. Like, you gotta obey, you gotta, fire and brimstone, heaven or hell kind of thoughts. And it can be confusing to those. It might even make you feel guilty. A lot of the books that I've been reading, Ramtha and Abraham Hicks, where they give you, or even like Paul Selig, who's I'm having a conversation with later today. He talks about you are the Christ. And for people to even think about that, like they feel guilty, or they feel like, oh, I'm going to hell because I even put myself up in that category.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because and it doesn't matter. It's not just the Western culture of heaven and hell. It's every single culture, and I think this is why I felt differently, because I was exposed. I went to Catholic school and was exposed to the whole concept of heaven and hell and getting baptized, otherwise you will never get to heaven, and so on. And then I was exposed to the whole Hindu thing of the karma, and that it's your karma, and you're not going to make it to nirvana, and you're always going to be trapped in this cycle of birth and death unless you improve yourself. And then there's the Chinese way, which is the Taoist way, which is where they kind of worship their deceased relatives, and if you displease your deceased relatives, they're going to put bad luck upon you. And so I was exposed to all of these, but what I noticed was each of these cultures thought that their culture their beliefs was the ultimate truth, and that anyone who didn't believe that way was actually going to, like, for example, if you were not baptized, you were not going to go to heaven. And so basically, because I was Hindu, I was not going to get to heaven. Or so each culture would kind of judge the rest of the world. So in a way, it was really interesting, because to me, all these worlds were like parallel worlds that existed simultaneously. So when I had the NDE and I experienced this whole other world, where I actually realized that death transcends religion and culture and everything. Like there was this whole other world that is beyond all of these simultaneous worlds that I was experiencing. And I realized that even this world of death, each culture has interpreted it in their own language. And I realized that world of death also exists simultaneously. And it is not a place far away that we go to, but it is a reality that we can access. And it's here and now, just like those different cultures live simultaneously alongside with no overlap. The realm of death also lives simultaneously with no overlap, unless we choose to penetrate into it and tap into it.
How do you penetrate? Like, how do you tap into the other side? Like, is it through your meditation? I think you explain a little bit of that in one of your videos. I think going out in nature was one of them.
Yes, going out in nature. For me, certain types of music also helps me because music actually can um, alter your thought patterns, your brain waves, I guess. And so I select certain types of music, and then I just sit and meditate, and I can actually get to what I feel for me are pretty awesome states,
Sure.
transcendent states.
Now,
And mhm,
sorry, you also stated in the book about God is a state of beingness, right? Like
yeah,
it wasn't like an entity or what we visualize as God with an old man with a beard and looking down from his throne. It's a state of being.
yes.
Can you hit on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I, up until uh, my NDE, I always thought that God was a being. In Hindu culture, they call it Brahma, but we have multiple gods. And then, of course, in Western culture, God is God or Jesus. And so I always thought that we were judged by beings from the other side. But when I was in that state, I realized that there is no separation. Even my dad and other beings and higher beings and all of us, we are all connected. We're all facets of the same consciousness, and being in that state of consciousness was being in a state of God. We are all facets of God. And sometimes nowadays I use the analogy of, if you remember those mirror balls from the 80s and the disco days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like that ball with all these little mirrors. And so when you have a mirror ball hanging in the room, it refracts, it creates this, when there's light shining on it, it creates on the walls, it creates all these spots, like these little speckles of light, all like hundreds and hundreds of little light speckles on the walls. Now, imagine if the mirror ball is God, and each of those facets, each of those little faces of the mirror is one spirit, one soul. So it's each one of us. And so all of us together, collectively, we make up God. We're all expressions of God, each one of those. But when we have light shining through us, we're creating these speckles of light on the wall. That light on the wall is our physical expression. So that's us. Each mirror expresses itself and casts that light on the wall. Now imagine if each of those lights on the wall, because they look like separate individual dots, imagine if each of them represented each one of us in physical form. And imagine if they all fought with each other, and because they believed they were separate. Imagine if each of those dots said that, no, you have to believe my way or the highway. You are wrong. And they fought wars with each other, and they beat each other up, and they discriminated against each other, and they competed with each other, only to die and find out that, oh, that was a reflection from this mirror, my spirit. That was just my spirit expressing itself. And we are all part of this one mirror ball.
That's probably the best metaphor I've ever heard. Like seriously. You have a lot of them, and it's the only way you can really describe your story in some instances. Like you have one about the warehouse and the flashlight, and it definitely makes sense. Like we are just, we focus in on our lives, and we forget about everything else in existence and quantum physics. We don't have time to get into that, but that's probably the best metaphor that I've heard anyone explain, like consciousness, God, and how we all intertwine. I mean, yeah, I think that your story is fascinating. I mean, even Dr. Wayne Dwyer wrote your foreword, and you knew him. Like, what kind of guy was he? Like, I just recently got turned on to him, so I wasn't, he's passed since, so I haven't had the opportunity to read, obviously have him on the show, but What was he like?
Oh, he was a great guy. He was so generous about helping other people. I was so blessed. I think it was really divine intervention. He discovered my story online, and what happened was that I didn't have a book out or anything at that point. I was just Anita from Hong Kong who had almost died from cancer. And I wrote my story on an online forum on the internet. And I didn't even give my full name. I was just written as Anita M's NDE. And it went viral. I didn't expect it to go viral. I wrote it more for cathartic reasons, and I wanted to set it free because I felt that one of my purposes was to come back and share my story. And I wasn't anyone who was known. I didn't know how to get a book deal, nothing. So I just wrote it on the internet and set it free. I wrote it on a near-death experience website called NDERF. I submitted it to them and they put it on their site, and it went viral, and it was discovered by Dr. Wayne Dyer, who is a multiple time New York Times best-selling author. He's sold millions of books. And in 2010, he discovered my story online, and he contacted his publishers, and he had his publishers track me down. And that whole story is a fascinating one, which I describe in my book about the timing of when they found me. It was literally when I was ready to share my story with the world, because up until then, I wasn't ready to publicly share my story as myself. But his publishers tracked me down and said to me that Wayne Dyer had told them about my story, and they wanted to ask me if I would be interested in writing a book, which Wayne Dyer would help me to promote. So when I received that email from Hay House, it was literally out of the blue and totally unexpected. I started to cry. I thought, wow, maybe this is how I'm supposed to share my story. It felt like divine intervention. And so I had a book deal handed to me. So I signed the book deal. I wrote my story for them and wrote the book. And then Wayne Dyer invited me to the US. I was living in Hong Kong. He invited me to come on stage with him and come on TV with him. And he had been so moved by my story. And when I started sharing on stage with him, he said to me, I want you to travel with me, because he said, the audience really are being moved by your story. I want everybody, and he would say this, he said, I want everybody to hear your story. And he would stand on stage and tell people that if you buy one book, buy Anita's book, buy Dying to Be Me, don't buy mine, buy hers. So I mean, who does that? Wow. So yeah, so he said, I want everybody to hear your story. And so for 4 years, Hay House would pay all my travel and accommodation. I actually traveled with him from 2011 to 2015. And he was my mentor, and he passed away. And I would have continued to have been traveling with him, but he passed away. But I still feel him helping me from the other side.
Sure.
And I still feel he's there cheering me on and opening doors for me.
That's awesome. What is your mission now? Like, what are you most passionate about, and how are you pushing your story out there?
I have been creating, so I have now written my third, or you could call it fourth book. So since Dying to Be Me, I wrote a second book called What If This Is Heaven? And in that book, I speak about how we have kind of created our own hell and how it's possible to turn it around. And then I put out a children's book, but I've just completed my third adult book, which is called Sensitive is the New Strong. And that's coming out in March. And I've also created what I call an online sanctuary, which is a membership platform where I'm trying to create a world almost like a parallel reality. That's why I keep talking about the different paradigms or realities I grew up in, like a world that we can slip into where the marinade is one of love and in consciousness, and where, because this physical world, the dominant paradigm here, has become extremely fear-based. And what that's doing is that it's making us worse. It's making us sicker, and it's making us more angry and more fearful. And so I have created like what I call a parallel world for people who need something that's the opposite for their own health and well-being and sanity. And so I call it the sanctuary, and it allows people to bathe and marinate in a completely different world.
I love it. I love it. I can speak to you literally all day. Where can people find more about you and point them in the direction so they can find out more about this membership community?
So my website is very simple. It's anitamoorjani.com. That's ANITAMOORJANI.com. And everything is on my website. That's the information on my books, and also I'm active on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all the information for my online sanctuary, the membership sanctuary, is also on my website.
Fabulous. Last question, kind of a big one, and I'm sure you're going to give me an amazing answer. Anita, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. I want, gosh, that's a big one. It's really big.
I mean, not that you haven't done amazing things already. I'm just saying, like, you know, I mean, somebody comes back and, you know, from a near-death experience, I mean, that's pretty much your legacy, right? To spread that message. But I know there's more greatness in you, and I just want to hear a little bit about that.
I think, yeah, it's a big one for me to put encapsulated into one, because there's a couple of things. I mean, one of them is I want people to know that the world doesn't suffer, you know, like people are afraid that loving themselves is selfish. And I think I was going to mention that earlier as well, that one of the problems I had growing up was I used to believe loving myself is selfish. But what I want people to know is that the world is not suffering from too much self-love. It's suffering from too little. And so I would love to see more love in this world and less fear. And what I would like to be remembered for is the person who reminded people to live from a state of love and joy and not from a state of fear. And that we are so much healthier when we take care of ourselves and our health from a place of love and a place of joy, as opposed to from a place of fear of disease. I would love to change the paradigm around health and wellness, because our current medical paradigm is illness-based. It's not wellness or health-based. What we have is an illness fear system as opposed to a healthcare system. So I would love for people to remember me one day for changing that around and for helping people to see their well-being in a completely different way. One that is loving and nurturing as opposed to fear-based. One where we increase health as opposed to eradicate disease.
Oh, I mean, you nailed that one. You definitely, that's a great legacy. And you also said something interesting while I was watching the video. You said you hoped that there would be some type of medical institute that would treat or help the other 80% of us, right? Like you're talking about us as icebergs, and this physical form is the 20%, and the spirituality, the consciousness that is on the other side is the 80%. And you would hope to see medical facilities that would help treat that other 80%. That would be interesting. Like I can only imagine what that would look like.
Yes. Because basically we are not just physical. And in fact, I didn't get a chance to touch on that, and that we are so much more than physical beings. And our medical paradigm only touches on the physical, whereas we are actually like icebergs, where you can only, our physical self is only the tip of the iceberg, but there is more of us that you can't see. And when we have a physical illness, it only shows up on the physical after it's been in our emotional, spiritual, mental states for a while. And when we treat it, we're only treating the physical symptoms. I would love to see places, I call them sanctuaries, and my online one is an online version of exactly this. It's places that nurture people, the whole 100% of them, their mental, spiritual, emotional state, as well as their physical state.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Anita, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been seriously, you're an inspiration, and I really, really am thankful for your time today.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Trey. I've been very moved by you and your energy. Thank you. I'm at a loss for words.
I want to say thank you to Anita for coming on the show and spending some time with us. I know she is busy. I know you're busy, Anita. Thank you so much. I want to thank you, the listener, for taking time out of your busy day. I know you guys are busy. Thank you for downloading. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts from. It helps me scale the show. It helps me get this out to those who may need it the most. Thank you, guys. I hope you have an amazing week, and I'll talk to you guys later.